The kosher dietary laws are listed in this week's Torah portion of Shemini. Specifically, it identifies what validates an animal, fish, or bird, as well as what specific animals meet the criteria for being kosher. An animal needs to chew its cud and have split hooves. A fish needs fins and scales. Birds cannot be predators. Firstly, we need to understand that this is a divine law from God, which is known as a chok. Our sages suggest that eating non-kosher foods damage our souls. There has been medical evidence that certain animals, insects, and fish do cause health issues. However, long before these studies were shared with the public, the commandment regarding kashrut existed. The following are all forbidden: insects, reptiles, and seafoods such as shellfish, crab, clams, etc. Furthermore, coming in contact with certain forbidden animals and insects causes one to become impure. Even upon meeting the criteria of the permissible animal, it still has to be slaughtered in the correct manner. A shochet is a person officially certified as competent to kill the cattle and poultry in the manner prescribed by Jewish law. Post-death, there are also rituals involving salting, covering blood, and removing certain sections of the animal which are forbidden. The laws are very specific and require 100% follow-through. We hear terms such as kosher style when frequenting certain restaurants or when establishments advertise. To be clear, kosher style is not the same as kosher. Even if an animal being offered on the menu happens to be a kosher animal, it is deemed not kosher unless it was slaughtered in the prescribed manner. Why don't fish require some form of slaughtering? One answer is that when the Jews were in the desert, they complained about the lack of meat. In response, Moses turned to God saying, "If the sheep and the cattle were slaughtered for them, would it suffice? If all the fish of the seas were gathered for them, would it suffice?" The fact that Moses separates the sheep and cattle from the fish teaches us that gathering fish is adequate. Also, we're informed to kill the fish as expeditiously as possible. There are many kosher products, and they're very accessible even during the holiday we just completed last night. While it is true that it is expensive to keep kosher, the same is true in educating our children in Jewish day schools. God rewards us for the following His commandments, especially when it incurs hardships or sacrifices. Our sages tell us that upon the destruction of the temple, the Babylonians took all the brightest minds and able people from Israel and had them transplanted to Babylon. They gave them new names and tried to inculcate them with Babylonian ideals. Daniel was one of those drafted by Nebuchadnezzar to serve his court. He was ordered to undergo a 3-year training period during which he was to eat a daily portion of the king's food and drink of his wine. Daniel decided that he would not defile himself with non-kosher food nor drink, and convinced his supervisor to only eat vegetarian food and drink water. The supervisor was afraid that Daniel would look emaciated, but Daniel convinced him to try it for 10 days and see the results. Daniel found favor in the eyes of his superior, who agreed to the experiment, and a miracle occurred, and he looked fairer and healthier than all the other youths who were dining on the royal food. Following the downfall of the Babylonians, the Persian king named Darius reigned. There was a royal edict that for the next 30 days, no one was allowed to make supplications except the emperor himself. It was well known that Daniel prayed 3 times daily, and the king's advisors were envious of Daniel and wanted to entrap him. Daniel violated the edict and was caught praying. The advisors immediately reported him to the king. Even though Daniel found favor in the eyes of the king, he had no alternative but to put him to death. They starved a group of lions and threw Daniel into the lion's den. Daniel prayed and a miracle occurred, and the lions did not touch him. Our sages comment that Daniel was very holy, but was specifically rewarded for the sacrifice he made regarding kosher dietary laws. When the emperor realized nothing happened to Daniel, he ordered that the very advisors who recommend Daniel to be killed be thrown into the very lion's den that he was thrown into. They were immediately devoured. There is a priority eating kosher, but we also need to live in a kosher way. This idea permeates with how ethical and moral we are, such as honesty in business and the manner in which we treat our relationships. There are some that are meticulous in ritual observances, but for some reason, it fails to carry over into their day-to-day living. God expects us to be holy in all our endeavors. It says in this week's portion, "Be holy, because I, God, am holy." May we see the day in the very near future where we all can share in a kosher congregational meal with one another. Shabbat Shalom.